Hello and welcome to Why Design, the podcast where we explore the stories behind the founders and senior leaders shaping the world of physical product development. I'm Chris White, your host and founder of Kodu, a recruitment company dedicated exclusively to physical product development. Over the past decade, I've had the privilege of interviewing remarkable people in this space, and their incredible stories inspired me to create this podcast. In each episode, we dive into the journeys, insights, and lessons from founders and design leaders driving innovation in people and planet-friendly hardware. So let's get started. In today's episode, I'm joined by Hugo Martin, Director of Product Design at WMP Creative, where he's been leading a multi-award-winning team for over 14 years. Hugo's journey is a fascinating one, stepping into a family-run business that at the time didn't even have a product design division. He took the reins, built it from scratch, turning it into one of WMP's most strategically important arms. We get into the balance between intuition and process in product design, when to trust your gut, and when a structured approach is necessary. Hugo shares insights from designing everything from life-saving gas safety devices, where rigorous process is crucial, to high-end pizza ovens, where embracing the theatre of cooking takes priority over engineering. We also talk about how consultancies can stay competitive in an evolving landscape, what AI means for industrial designers, and the shift towards more holistic design services that go beyond just the product. So whether you're a designer, entrepreneur, or just fascinated by how great products come to life, this episode is packed with insights. So let's get on with it, shall we? Okay, Hugo, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's really good to have you. So I'm going to do my best, as we were just discussing before we went live, just to set the scene, give listeners a bit of an insight into you. So, Hugo, you are currently the Director of Product Design over at WMP Creative, where you've been leading a multi-award-winning team for just over 14 years now. Your expertise covers industrial design, design strategy, and concept generation, with a strong focus on using design to add value to products and brands. Do feel free to jump in if I get any of this wrong, by the way, Hugo.
No, that's perfect. Yeah.
So, you started your career back at The Alloy, back in 2007, should I say. Spent 3 years or so there before moving over to WMP. Kind of family-run business. It's your father, wasn't it, that set the business up?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time the business didn't have a product design department. It was more known for its photography and graphic design and digital services. So you came in fresh-faced, bright, bushy-tailed, 3 years at The Alloy, and here you go. It's a responsibility to set up a whole new division. And you've been doing that for the last 14 years or so. Picking up a bunch of awards along the way. Industry recognition such as Red Dot Design Awards, IF Awards, European Design Awards, and so fantastic. So we'll dip into that shortly, but as we discussed when we were prepping for this, Hugo, really want to dive into your views on intuition versus process in product design, and where the place is for that, and where it's appropriate to go with your gut or go with a process, whether that's on projects or business development when it comes to design consultancy. So really looking forward to diving into this. And let's as we do every week on this, we'll start at the beginning. Why design? What kind of got you interested in product design?
Well, I think probably quite typical. I'm sure you hear a lot from the same people, but at school, definitely quite heavily dyslexic, and probably a smattering of ADHD in there as well. And that kind of found it quite hard to concentrate on lots of subjects that didn't take my interest. Things like chemistry and maths and so on. I'd never really kind of able to focus well, but as soon as it was art and design, I kind of like a laser focus, really kind of into it, and it's really occupied my mind outside of out of school. I did a lot of it myself, my own free time. So just kind of a real deep passion for it, and real kind of love of the craft, actually physically making things initially. Went to, really lucky to go to schools which had a good design set up, and it's not the case for a lot of schools, but I was extremely fortunate there, and that my school had a proper kind of resistant materials course, great workshop, so really got to develop those skills through school.
Awesome. So it was there right from the beginning. It wasn't.
Yeah, I feel quite lucky. I mean, a lot of people kind of, struggle to know what they want to do when they're older, but I was always deadly clear that and also because of my parents, my father having a business in the creative industries, it was kind of like quite an open door to that as being a job. Whereas I think for a lot of people, whose parents are plumbers or accountants or whatever it is, it's kind of not something which is obvious. A lot of people don't realise products are developed and designed, whereas that was kind of always quite open to me. So extremely lucky, really.
Absolutely. So, and I guess at that time, the studio was more on the photography side. I'm guessing. Was that ever a consideration?
It started off in photography, as in my father did that when he was in his 20s, but he was quite entrepreneurial, so kind of developed the company to fit the needs of his customers. So started off in film photography, but then that was being shown at events, so he started going to events, and at events they also needed graphic design. So it kind of evolved over time, and digital became a bigger thing. So that was an element. So by the time that we added the product design division, there was already kind of a presence of being a multidisciplinary agency, and product design fits very well into that because you can start right at the beginning. What are the insights? How do we make something better? Create the product and then market it. So that's why it's been a very successful kind of addition to the company.
Brilliant. Yeah. So after graduating, you went and worked at the Alloy. How was that as a foundation for you?
Really good. Yeah. Really good team there. Very talented people I was working with. And it's quite a jump, going from university to real consultancy, working with real clients. And I think it was, they do great work. Tanya, I'm still friends with, still does. He runs it now. It's good a grounding as you could ever really get, I think. And I think they're very good at kind of, I think what that showed me as opposed to university was kind of the importance of getting a really strong narrative when selling ideas. University, you're kind of doing your project and it's kind of its own closed thing, but thinking about the kind of bigger picture, how you can sell it into a client is kind of obviously pretty critical in terms of being successful later.
Massively, yeah. It's just that missing link, isn't it, between kind of the academic studies and the reality of what's needed out in the real world. So you were there for 3 years, and then made the move over to WMP. Were you ever kind of resisting that? Because it can, I think a lot of people can resonate with it. I don't want to follow my father, or I don't want to follow my, that path. But
I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean it's. I always wanted to have my own company at some point and like have control of the kind of projects I did and who I worked with and the kind of clients we go after. So that was always an ambition. So the original idea was, set up a new product design company, but seeing that there could be this kind of bolt-on just made a lot of sense from the point of view of, you're starting off, if it's a totally fresh company where there's, no accounts and no accountants to help with that side of it and stuff, it's a much bigger undertaking. So again, like really just made use of that advantage. Feels a bit cheaty, but
it's opportunity.
It's a great opportunity, really. It just made so much sense to do it in that way. And I could also see that it would add value to the overall company and that we get in there earlier. And that's kind of the way it's worked out. As I said, projects often now start with products and then it kind of infiltrates into the rest of the business. We end up doing, marketing support and creating the films. And that's a real big plus for me because I think it's, at Alloy, we'd design a product and then, help with the manufacture liaison, but then kind of see you later. Whereas to be able to see it the whole way through and, collect these insights at the very beginning and then be able to tell that story through marketing communications, it's just very satisfying and it's very beneficial for the client because it's the same people telling the same story.
Absolutely.
Right to the end and you kind of get very little dilution.
It's an interesting take, isn't it? Because, especially in the product development, physical product development kind of consultancy space, a lot of the time it's consultancies trying to add on the manufacturing piece. It's like taking it all the way through from research concept through to manufacture. But you guys are doing it more on the storytelling piece as well. So it's a full suite.
The whole way, yeah.
Yeah.
And also including digital. There's quite a big overlap now between products and digital.
Yeah.
So, and that's really important, right? Because we're creating a product nowadays, a lot of it is in the digital user experience as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's all interconnected, isn't it? And in fact, one of the businesses I'm working with now, they're looking for visualization, to show off their kind of concepts to potential investors. It's like we know what we think it's going to look like, so we need someone to realize that, to storytell and get investors excited about kind of what they're buying into. It's all that kind of all interconnected. You were relatively kind of still pretty green, weren't you, at that stage? 3 years in, you kind of learned a lot, but still got a lot to learn. And I do want to move on to the main topics, though, but I think this is an important part of it, really. Looking back at those early days with WMP, what would you say were some of the biggest kind of take-home lessons, really, or the challenges? Because setting something up from scratch, even though you've got the safety net of the established business, it's all new, isn't it?
I guess the answer is one step at a time. So kind of got the basic fundamentals from Alloy. But then, the first challenge is how the hell do you find clients, close things down. So winning the first project was kind of instrumental. So because obviously you come from Alloy, you can't show their work. So it's really you've got to find someone who will take that leap and trust you to do a good job. So the first ever project we did was a razor called the X1 for a company called Berlin Web.
Cool.
And it wasn't like it was an extremely profitable project. It was a fairly small amount. But
you need the case study.
We need the case study. And then one thing leads to another, and that won some awards and got kind of seen by an entrepreneur in America. That led on to a massive project. Still one of the biggest projects we've ever done off the back of a relatively small project. So, I think it's just a case of getting something out and then trying really hard just to build relationships with everyone and each time do as good a job as you can possibly do. So they all come back, and repeat business is massive for us. Pretty much all of our clients are repeat. And then you can build on that and then get the kind of bigger clients each time. And the kind of amounts we're charging now for projects are just so different to what it was in the early days.
You've got the confidence then, haven't you? You've got the portfolio of case studies. You've learned a load of lessons. You know kind of what problems you're good at solving. So you can. I guess in those
early days, we were kind of also, I was still bringing value to the business, and I was helping to design other stuff. Exhibitions and all sorts of things which weren't product design. You could still, being a product designer, being quite versatile, help out with those things. But over time, now it's just obviously product design and helping with the marketing and UX side.
Cool. And how long did it take then from you joining to landing that first project?
Back, it was definitely a couple of a while. So, a couple of months to get properly moving.
I bet you're buzzing.
That's great.
That's awesome. Cool. So then fast forward today, you've got a small team, and you mentioned on our kind of intake call for this, actually it's transformed into one of the most consistent kind of strategically important parts of of WMP.
It's steady.
So
that's down to our repeats, I guess. Because the cycles, obviously, things take a while to come back around again. But as long as you have enough clients who you compressed last time, they do come back. And for similar kind of projects, similar kind of scale, so it's definitely more predictable than something like events, where it's much more. Companies often chop and change different suppliers and all sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, that's great. So, on a prep call for this, you expressed a passion for kind of where process fits in versus intuition. I'm kind of segues nicely from what you were just saying, because I imagine you've got a pretty tight process for keeping those clients coming back, and not necessarily just leaving it to fate or assume that they'll come back. You still got to
remind them of who you are. But yeah, perhaps if you want to kick us off on where that came from. There was a couple of case studies I think you mentioned.
Yeah, I guess it's because we are a consultancy and we jump between different sectors so much. And you see, when you start a new project with a new client in a new area, you've got to be very good at coming up to speed very quickly and understanding what the user issues are, what their needs are as a company. And so, yeah, we started to do quite a lot more kind of research for certain projects. But I still think there's a really interesting balance with process where, sometimes it's highly important, and sometimes you can get away with just being far more intuitive. And I think it's a kind of topic people seem to think about quite a lot, and I see quite a lot of posts on LinkedIn, I'm sure you do, of when process can get in the way or when it can be extremely helpful and it's vital. So it's kind of it's an interesting area, and as someone who has to quote for a lot of projects, it's really important to kind of get that balance right and give the right amount of process, or know when you can roll out intuition a bit more. So I guess what I mean by process as well, because there's loads of processes in design. So I guess I'm wrapping that in terms of things that fall outside of typical industrial design. Some projects, it's very much shape and form and working on that basis. But I'm talking about like really user research, interviewing, observational studies, user journey mapping, which we do quite a lot of on complicated projects. And then past that point, that's kind of the learning side, but the validation steps that you might want to go through. So sometimes it's important to test that your concepts, which one is the appropriate one to go with, before making like decisions on that lead to expensive results. Whereas intuition, of course, is much about using your internal knowledge based on your experience to kind of go down that right direction. And there's all sorts of intuitions. Some people are really good at intuitively making something beautiful that people are going to love. Some people know how to take a great photo, or really intuitive gaining insights from a conversation. So there's different parts to intuition.
Okay.
But yeah.
And I'm guessing some of the process comes in, in terms of how the client sees it as part of your proposal. And have you ever lost work or feel like you may have lost work because your proposal had too much detail in terms of the process? Do you think that's ever scared kind of a client off? Or
I guess in our industry, time is money. And so if you say you need to do this huge amount of research and a company feels they've got that in hand, then obviously there's a conversation to be had there. I wouldn't say I've lost any work with that, because the way we quote is very transparent. We can have always, I make a point of talking through my quotes with the clients and making sure that they're happy with number of research days we do, and basically walk them through the plan of what I intend to do with their budget, which helps a lot for us. So I'd say no, but it's an important factor, and that's why it's worth having a conversation about, and be able to extract what they already know, because that's often an extremely helpful starting point, of course.
Yeah, so you've got that constant and immediate feedback loop, haven't you? You can, if you're sitting in the room or across the Zoom call with the client, and you can sense that, I've got a bit overkill on the on the process here, I've added too much. You can dial that back in straight away, and
it's definitely a really important step. That because obviously, like, I guess the point is, like, for whatever if we deliver a quote and basically list how we use our time, we still need to get, like, our obligation is to get to a great result in the physical output. So in a way, we've got to make the most like time efficient way to get to that end result that they're happy with the budget that's available.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've worked on a range of projects you were talking to me about that kind of range from highly structured projects to do with gas safety devices, and then more intuition led around kind of pizza ovens, let's say. So how do you find or how do you balance process and intuition in design? Because I guess there's a bit of a conflict, especially within the designer who just wants to create, and then there's a process that needs to be followed. How do you balance that?
So I think it's very much dependent on the project. And there's always a kind of a sliding scale here. I think what is the project scope is like the first point. Sometimes you can get quite a narrow scope. It's just industrial design. So, for example, we did some work supporting White's internal mechanical engineering team with some industrial design for their carbon bike frames. And then there, we didn't really need to do any research at all. They kind of pointed out the geometry they wanted. We were really just kind of sketching out on iPads, how best to kind of style this. And then it was kind of a 3D modeling exercise to get to a good result. So that's about as limited as scope as we get to work with. Conversely, if you're working on like a medical device thing, sometimes it's very much kind of front end. You're interviewing people, it's very process heavy. So, of course, that changed a lot. The complexity of a project, the first project we did was a razor. It couldn't be any simpler. It was really just a handle.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's part of a bigger ecosystem and you've got to interface between different products, docking stations or chargers or calibrating kit, then obviously that's very complex. And then it's kind of a level of ambition, I guess. Sometimes the goal of a project is to optimize something that's maybe been done multiple times before. Sometimes you're, creating something far more radical, where it's, you've got a very competitive market, and you've got to search really hard to find the kind of standout points which can help you differentiate. So there, kind of more processes is needed. Of course, like whether it's a area that we would have experience in makes a big difference. Some projects, like we are the target market in some ways, and other times not. So just kind of where you sit in your experience level and exposure to the area makes a big difference. And then, as I said, like how much knowledge the internal team has that you can kind of, get out of them. Even their mindset, I think, makes a big difference. In that some clients like actively want you to kind of challenge everything and kind of start fresh. And that's often bigger companies where there might be multiple stakeholders who all have got their kind of knowledge base. And the job then is to kind of extract bits of information from each of them to kind of put out together this bigger holistic understanding of where you need to go. Others, like, very clearly know what they want and therefore you've got to listen to them and go after it.
Yeah. Do you, I'm getting, you're working with a range of companies as well, from kind of the more established brands who I'm guessing have used consultancies in the past or have worked with you previously, so they get that process, they get kind of the expectation, how the dynamic between kind of you guys and the client, kind of how that's supposed to work or how it works best, but then you'll work with startups as well who may not have any experience working with outside consultancies, let alone creatives. So I'm guessing there's an education piece on there, or how do you balance that kind of?
I think that's not been too difficult for us because it's kind of part of the sell-in process, I guess. If someone's new to us, then we'll show them. That's why the case studies are so helpful. Like, show them projects we've done in the past and the kind of steps we've taken the other clients through to get to a good result. And often in showing someone like how you're going to tackle their project and why that's going to be helpful, then that kind of bridges that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and I think when we spoke a little while ago as well, you highlighted Nothing and Teenage Engineering as brands that you mentioned lean more heavily into intuition. Do you see kind of any shifts in industry, especially design consultants or consultancies that I speak to kind of over recent kind of months, kind of they're struggling, they're feeling like the market's contracting, or it's been coming harder to compete as well, especially if there's, companies going for cheaper freelance options, let's say, or moving away. Do you think there's a shift or, moving towards more structured kind of work, or Is there still a
No,
place
I
for
think it
instincts?
depends so much on. I think that's why it's interesting because it's such a fluid spectrum. And I think the nothing is a very interesting example in this because Adam Bates, who I know, is the design director there, and he's been tasked with building up the team. I was watching a clip. He was very eloquently explaining like their process. And it's interesting because like he's obviously from a Dyson background, right? He worked 10 years at Dyson, pretty senior. So had all that kind of Dyson engineering rigor, if you like. They're extremely process oriented company, of course.
Yeah.
And can have to be of that scale. Whereas nothing at the very arty end of the spectrum. So it's interesting to see how he's kind of transitioned his kind of way. But I think what he said that was particularly interesting to me was that there's kind of a baseline of of functionality in all their products. They obviously have to work well. They've got to be intuitive. They've got to be easy to use. They've got to be extremely well engineered, and that's kind of you have to be a flagship phone. But then there's this kind of like emotional layer beneath that of interest and kind of value add, which is a bit like what this kind of stuff that teenage engineering do. There's something quite different and deliberately different about their work, and that's the same with nothing products now. In that, they're kind of the opposite approach to a focus group approach. If you do focus groups, you might end up with a 4-point day. Everyone knows that story. Whereas nothing are kind of trying to be a bit rebellious and succeeding with that, I think. And it's just funny to see how it's kind of panned out. Like if you were to ask someone what spec they wanted for a phone, they wouldn't be asking for flashy lights on the back, would they? It's just but they've put that in, and those glyphs just seem to really resonate with a certain kind of people. And I guess they're just being very well targeted. They know who their market is and who it's not, and they're building a community around that. And I think knowing who their market is not is part of that. They really kind of are quite focused, which is again what you need to stand out. So I think companies that take that approach and are quite bold, and as I say, like do both elements. It's not process or intuition. It's do the process to get the stuff working and make it functional, but then also have something extra, a bit of flair and a bit of character, which resonates with certain people and sells you products. Because you can't really
absolutely, and they've got a great marketing team, haven't they? Especially the social media side. I really enjoyed the whole kind of the jumping on the opportunity with the Jaguar rebrand and all that.
A lot of
it was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Jaguar follows nothing, and it's like there must be a great deal of autonomy for that social media side for them just to go at that.
And they're very open on their own process, aren't they? They invite ideas and they talk about it, and they kind of they're very quite transparent in their product design, but also in their in the way they interact with people. I think is quite interesting.
I'm listening to Creativity Inc. at the moment. Another podcast guest recommended it, and I can't for the life of me remember who it was, but the founder's story from Pixar, and that's just reminded me of their kind of mentality of anyone can talk to anyone can try something if it's to improve the business. Everyone's empowered to kind of give stuff a go, and I'm getting the sense that nothing have got a similar kind of attitude there, especially when it comes to marketing. Because imagine a lot of companies, there'd be an approval chain to go through. Oh, can I do this thing on thing? And it pulls in Jaguar Land Rover. It's like, no, you can't do that.
They're quite kind of rebellious spirit.
And they've got their target, or they know who they're not appealing to, and it works. So
they're the fastest growing mobile company there is, I think.
It's nuts. Why would you get into designing mobile phones now? It's you think about it kind of logically, it's doesn't make sense, but they're doing a great job. So awesome. Okay, so when it comes to kind of working with clients, there's a discussion sometimes whether to trust the process or trust their instincts. Is that ever kind of something that you're working on with them, or educating them on that kind of side of things?
I'm interrupting this episode to share some exciting things happening around why design. At the core of this podcast are the incredible design journeys my guests have been on and where they're heading. And these journeys stem from the relationships they build, the communities they're part of, and the amazing achievements that come from collaboration. So beyond the podcast, we're hosting regular online huddles and quarterly meetups in the UK, with plans underway for an annual gathering in the US. We're also running hands-on workshops both in person at makerspaces and online to connect and inspire people in physical product development. So if you'd like to join us or stay in the loop about upcoming events, sign up at teamkodu.com/events or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
Well, as I said, when we quote, we kind of lay out what we want to do with the project, and because I guess we're gauging at that early stage if we need to do user interviews and if there's going to be much value in doing a user journey map. And as I said, that totally depends on what you are designing and the company and all that other stuff we spoke about. But so yeah, it's just kind of matching it up basically to what the need is and what their internal team is and so on. But maybe I should just go into some real life examples. Might be easier to
go for it. Yeah. Shoot.
So yeah, I mean, two projects that were kind of interesting. I thought we were kind of bringing up. First one was quite process heavy. So designing a company called Crocon. They do life-saving gas safety products that are wearable. But there's also kind of calibration devices to help make sure that they're working properly throughout their lifetime. So obviously quite high stakes. You don't want to mess this stuff up. It needs to be quite rigorous. So that was a very interesting project. The second one was a lot of fun. It's a company called Gosney. You may know they do quite high-end ovens.
Yeah.
Lovely products, lovely company. And our project there was to design a new oven, an ultra portable pizza oven, to fit into their range and could be more in line with the Dome, which is their premium product. So yeah, both like extremely interesting companies, both complete like powerhouses, really. They're top of their game, and very successful with, in both cases, a very talented internal team. So kind of, quite, in a way, quite daunting to start working with companies. I've been pinning Gosney images to my mood boards for years before we got talking to them. So it was quite exciting. I started the Crocon one, the process heavy one. So, I mean, it was just, as soon as we met them and went to their premises to kind of talk through the project, it was very obvious it was going to be a very complex project from the outset. There's so many different use cases, so many different personas who use the product in different ways. As I said, like the products are kind of wearable gas safety things. So you might wear those if you're working in a oil refinery or a steelworks or even like down sewers and stuff, often quite confined spaces where there's dangerous gases you need to be aware of. And so some of the team members who use these are like responsible for whole groups of people. They might be in charge of 20 people, and so for them it's they care about tracking the data and making sure everyone's safe, of course, and was wearing them, that they can see that they're on and functioning. Ironically, the people who wear them often don't even really want to wear them. They're all concerned about like being tracked and this kind of stuff, and really treat them extremely poorly. I mean, seeing the products in a oil refinery was fascinating because they're covered in grease, most sensors kind of covered up, just being bashed and really almost deliberately vandalized. They were so badly looked after. Then there's kind of a data collection side and how that works. Our software team were also a UX team were kind of key in this project as well. And as I kind of said earlier, like it was interesting because there's so many experts at that company. Some people are really knowledgeable about the science of how the sensors work and that kind of stuff. Some are very much more on the user side and understand the hurdles that people face. So in a way, our job was to kind of extract that knowledge from those multiple stakeholders and bring it all together. So we did quite a bit of research, a lot of on-site user interviews, which was very insightful. But one of our team was sent off on a confined space course, which means like through little tunnels, and literally kind of training. He's got a certificate. He could be a gas safety expert now. He had to shave off his beard in the process, so the mask would fit, which he wasn't delighted about. But other than that, it was quite interesting.
Well, there's two things there. There's the crawling into tight spaces that's a no from me. But then kind of shaving your beard off as well, if it's a significant beard, it's like
he left a nasty moustache on for a while, but but that was interesting. But so they really got into it from their side and really helped us do a good job there. And that's not a project that you could wing. You really have to understand it. And as an example, I'm trying to think of an insight that would kind of be easy to explain. But we found that imagine you're crawling down to the sewer, right? And you're looking down, you're breathing down. You might be breathing heavily because you're climbing stuff on. They were getting a lot of false alarms from people. The device is mounted on your kind of shirt there. So people were kind of looking downwards, breathing downwards, blowing carbon dioxide from their breath over the sensor, which is causing the alarm to go off. They're thinking, "Oh crap! Is there carbon dioxide here, or have I set up a false alarm?"
Yeah.
So knowing that kind of thing, you can go, "Okay, well, I can take an attribute from that. I can remove those sensors from the front and put them on the bottom face," which is what we did. So there's quite a lot of things like that we would never have known. If it was purely an industrial design project and we were asked to make the thing look good, they would have stayed on the front face and that would have been an issue forever. So there are a lot of learnings which led to a good result. And again, if the sensor's on the bottom, it's easier to dock into a calibration system. There's quite a lot of things which can add up. And then the process didn't really just stop at initial research. We got a lot of value after the kind of validation steps early on. So once we designed our concepts, we were making just quick, dirty 3D prints and visualizing the renders and showing them to the people we'd interviewed before. And that was really encouraging, and in that we wouldn't tell them too much about what we'd done. We was just going, which of these do you like? But we could see they were instantly drawn to the ones that had the kind of right attributes that we also backed with our own intuition of having heard all this stuff, which is the best way to go. So that was kind of really helpful. And as it's early on, you can sort of pivot at that point and make changes, which we did. So that was kind of an example of a full processy project. And of course, the budget has to reflect that. Whereas Gosney, different setup completely, really strong brand, with lots of extremely knowledgeable stakeholders. So Tom Gosney, who we're working with directly on the project, is obviously the founder and owner. And we worked very closely with him, and they're a super passionate team. So that project was more about, we still did research, but it was less speaking to users. It was more really finding out from the stakeholders what was the way to go. So we spoke to the head of brand, the head of customer services to find out issues with existing products, the engineering team, and of course, a lot Tom to get his vision, which was totally invaluable for the project. We did also interview brand ambassadors and some other users that we just found ourselves to get just to question their internal understanding, but there was less of that really. And again, it was interesting in that because of the kind of project and the kind of area, we found pain points, but we had to kind of, again, it was a bit more nuanced. And I'll give you an example. It is into whether pain points are real pain points or kind of an on-paper pain point. So, have you ever used a pizza oven?
I've not. No, I had a pizza oven attachment to my Weber barbecue. I've got a kettle barbecue, and apparently you can cook pizzas on it. I bought the pizza stone and everything. Could never get the oven up to the right temperature.
Well, that's it. That's what I was about to say. So cooking pizza is a temperature game.
Yeah.
And Gosney ovens get extremely hot. I'm talking 500 degrees hot. It's unbelievable. And it's a big kind of rolling flame. And so when they sent us products, which really upgraded our WMP lunch setup, and we're using them a lot. And again, anyone who's just getting into cooking pizzas, the first thing you do is burn the shit out of it. It's impossible not to when you're first learning. You stick it in, and it's they cook in 60 to 90 seconds. Is really fast. And when you're new to it, you don't really know about it. We're going to keep this thing turning constantly to not burn. So like, in a Crocon project, we'd been like, well, that's a pain point. Let's fix it. Let's make a rotating stone, or let's have the flame kind of as a ring, so it's all even and not burning in one spot. Whereas, I guess it's, speaking to Tom and their team, and also kind of eventually learning how to do these things. Like they were very, very clear that, especially Tom was like, this is not a microwave. This is not a clinical way of cooking. This is cooking with fire. And again, Tom's like extremely charismatic character. If you've seen his videos, he's like larger than life kind of. And he talks a lot about that kind of, primeval experience cooking with fire, and how it's kind of a theatre. It's kind of something that people actually enjoy, and it's true. Like once you, the faff with making a pizza is the preamble stuff. It's making the dough and getting all the ingredients right and kind of everything prepped. When you're doing it, it's over in 60 seconds. It's really not a big deal to turn it, and when you get good at it, you kind of want it to have these hot spots, so that you can like get this kind of even charring of, they call it like leopard spots, where it's slightly bad in areas, and it makes it look great and taste fantastic. So there's kind of stuff that would be a pain point, but which is not really once you kind of get more into it, of course.
Really interesting. I guess a lot of it's more about the education of the users, and the fact that you're gonna burn the first 5 pizzas and then you'll get the hang of it.
Yeah, exactly. and they do that. They've actually got like channels on YouTube of like how to cook, and it kind of takes you through from the bare basics through to making amazing food. So I think the education side is it, like educate rather than like dumb down the experience and make it boring. So that's
it's not a replacement for the oven in your kitchen. It's an entertaining piece, and it's a focal piece for a garden party.
Theatre is the right word for it. It's kind of there's an art to it, and people enjoy that and don't want that taken away from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not like we didn't learn stuff. We still had a lot of things that we changed in comparison to the product we were replacing. In line with their arc and their dome, we moved the burner to the side of the product. 2 advantages. Once, it made it a lot more compact. It wasn't as long, but also it's a lot easier to see. But the hotspot, because it's not like this, flame at the back and the bit of the back's burning, but I can't see.
Got you.
We put the controls like they were around the back. So you put them around the side next to the thermometer, so you can more easily get at it. A lot of it, of course, about portability. So obviously, we put these like big chunky handles on the top, which you can pick up and grab, and they don't get too hot. But then portability is not just can I carry it, it's also like weight reduction. So we reduced the weight by 30%. And that had the knock-on of, well, it's faster to heat up and to cool down, which is, if you're at a beach cooking, you kind of don't want to be waiting for an hour for it to cool down. That was very important. And then looking at the kind of bigger picture of what accessories will enhance this experience, and mean you can genuinely cook outdoors in the middle of nowhere. So there's a lot of work in there, and then it was all wrapped up in this kind of like super robust utilitarian Land Rover Defender kind of aesthetic that really kind of made it appealing and kind of aspirational. That you could, like, it just looked like it can handle anything and take bashes,
That's awesome.
It was kind of a good example of just taking stuff from them and really like learning from them, rather than and I guess that's what the research was. It was to bring us up to speed with what was going to be right for the brand.
That's brilliant. And you said you emailed me the day to say that that's just gone live, has it, that project?
Yeah, they've launched it on Instagram. It's getting a very positive response so far.
Awesome. No, that's great. It's definitely on my to buy list. Is a pizza oven for the garden. We've got a bunch of work to do in the house first before I spend money on outside. But I do. It was a blessing having a nice big garden during lockdown, and when we when things opened up a little bit and you could have your little kind of bubbles of 6 people, it made the most of the space outdoors. So that's awesome. So looking forward then, where do you see kind of the future of industrial design and kind of trends? Are you seeing a lot of people are worried about AI stealing their jobs, or kind of consultancy changes, as we mentioned earlier, with respect to a lot of consultancies struggling, budgets are tight, there's freelancers stealing projects. Stealing's probably a bit harsh, but taking projects that would normally have gone to a consultancy. Where do you see the future going? What kind of what trends excites you most, or in fact terrify you most?
Well, I think with new business, it's obviously you got to keep pushing there to find new people. But the close collaborations we've already got with the clients that we enjoy working with is extremely important to us. So I think the kind of relationship side, as you know, with your job really, is fundamental. And that's about making sure you really try as hard as you possibly can every single project, and your last project is your last reference really. So keeping that up, but also just being nice and personable and appreciative and so on is big. I think we have definitely benefited from offering that wide range of support. So not just in industrial design, but branching out and being quite open to change is definitely being good. If we only do industrial design, it would have been pretty difficult over the years. But because we kind of opened ourselves up to doing just consumer insight or whatever the client wants, we try and be as helpful as we can. And as I said, the marketing stuff ends up being quite a big part of our business. So helping more holistically, I think, has definitely been great. And also said earlier, enjoyable. I get a kick out of that stuff, and people who design the product are often good at telling the story and kind of visualizing stuff and eye photography and so on. So that makes sense. I'd love to get into, and something we're actively trying to get more into, kind of joint venture relationships with clients where it's more of a win-win rather than transactional, do the work for a fee. Just something that we're currently pursuing now with some of our closest clients.
Some businesses I know are having some joy with that, especially with smaller businesses or startups where they might not have the budget up front, but the opportunity's there, so you go into more of
that's it. There needs to be some kind of risk-reward arrangement for that to be.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially if you're starting off as well as a consultancy, like you need to get the case studies together, and there might be a future payoff.
It's tricky to arrange, and it's tricky to kind of, because it's kind of businessy stuff that we're not necessarily kind of so well attuned to. But I think it's a question of I'm keen to try this stuff now, and we've hopefully got enough kind of baseline client work to be comfortable enough to give this a shot. It's harder to do if you need the work. So it's kind of a luxury that you grow into after, as I said, 10 years of 14 years of doing this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. And you mentioned AI. When it first came out, it was a bit daunting, and it's kind of as someone who is an instinctive and who's someone who loves the concept generation side. Initially, I was, of course, a bit felt threatened by that, but we have to embrace it, and we have embraced it, and quite enjoying it now. Funnily enough, it's kind of a bit gone full circle where actually, I'm using it in various stages, just to make things more efficient and quicker. And
that's what it's all about, isn't it?
The results are pretty awesome. So
and there's some kind of people in the industry that are a bit nervous about or kind of worried for the future generation of industrial designers and how AI is going to impact that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a dangerous point we have right now because AIs will very well, if you're the one making these distinctive decisions which direction to go, But yeah, as has been widely kind of publicised, it's not great for more junior industrial designers who don't have the experience to, or learned intuition to guide the direction, and that they're more like being replaced by the fast output of concept ideas and so on. So yeah, I do see that as a risk, and I don't know what to do about it.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because just speaking from my own experience, there's a lot of kind of administration tasks or kind of or roles in my business that 2-3 years ago might have been delegated to a junior member of staff or an administrator or kind of an assistant. But now there's AI tools there that can do it very cheaply and very quickly, and very effectively. If you give it the right input, if it's aimed at the right thing.
Yeah, I think these things always have waves, don't they? I think CAD was the last wave in our industry.
Yeah,
when we designed the action camera, the senior mechanical engineering team from the manufacturing side, really experienced guy. He was very senior, but he said that back in the day when he first started working, that project would have had so many draftsmen. He's like 100 draftsmen just to work out all the sections and create all the drawings needed to make tooling, and he could just do it all with one Creo license, and get the same result with today's technology. And this seems like it's like the next step of that. In a way, I think Hector, who you've probably seen a lot on LinkedIn, has done a great job of kind of helping to kind of show that designers are still very important, and the the decision making process and that intuition that you need to guide it is right. I just slightly fear for the juniors coming through, as to how they'll be able to embrace it and use the tools, but just from the number of people recruiting for those junior jobs, I don't know.
Where do you see, or even if you might not have an answer to this, but where do you see the necessary pivot to be then in industrial designers to still be relevant, especially at that early stage?
Well, there's always still, currently at least, there's still jobs to be done, as in because right now AI takes you to a stage. It's usually what helps with the insight and kind of, as you say, project management side of it. But then, for industrial design, at least, it's still like an image. So knowing someone's got to take that and make something useful out of it. So there's still that kind of step of translating that, and AI can lie, as a sketch can lie. So there's still lots of working out to do to actually translate that into something tangible that you can actually make. So I think to be honest, it will just speed. And also, we're only really talking about a section of the wider process, the kind of ideation bit, really. So that's, I think, in a way, we'll just do more with the budget we have, and hopefully it won't really impact anyone. Everyone would just be that bit more efficient and that bit faster, and the client will get that much more value. That's just the way I see it, rather than like wiping out jobs. We've still got people on our team who do parts of the process that more senior people wouldn't, and that's just the way it works.
Yeah, there's end of the day, it comes down to the problems that you're looking to solve, and the way that you go about solving those problems might shift because of the tools and technology available to you, but you still need a person or kind of people involved to identify those and point the tools in the right way. So it's, especially when it comes to product design, it might look great or radical or whatever, but if it can't be made, or if it, if the sensor's on the wrong side, the AI is not going to know that. Well, exactly, that's only through breathing down into your chin, isn't it? So
in a way, it puts a more importance and more emphasis on the two parts we discussed of finding out what's actually important to guide the product, and then using the designer's intuition to translate that into something that's actually useful. Because all the front and the process bit really does is get you to a point where you've got a big bucket of ideas that you can either use or not use, and then there's that kind of filtering process of which ideas are worth including and which do we not, which should we discard, and that's the kind of role of the designer as I see it. And then on top of that, what's the, as Adam from Nothing said, what's the kind of icing on the cake? What's the sprinkling of like personality that the product has to help it stand out and like actually flourish in the market?
Yeah, massively. Cool. So we're kind of approaching time, Hugo, but looking forward, in the next 12 months or so, what are you most excited about, whether it be with WMP or kind of or personally or broader in terms of the market?
That's a broad question.
End on a big one.
To end on. Well, we've got a lot of exciting projects coming out soon, which I'm looking forward to kind of, seeing the market reception to. That's always exciting. When you've been working on something for so long, it's nice to see these things come out. And just clients I've kind of got sight of so far, there's a lot of interesting stuff to do. So yeah, I obviously can't talk about, but as I said, really just kind of developing where we've been and continuing to work with the clients that we really enjoy working with.
Awesome.
Very lucky so far.
Fantastic. And so no, that's been really, really interesting. A really kind of interesting take on kind of your insights into and your views on kind of process versus intuition. And I've really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Chris.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Why Design. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review wherever you're listening. It really helps others discover the podcast. And while you're at it, why not share it with a friend or colleague who'd enjoy it too? If you'd like to stay connected or explore more about the work we're doing at Kodu, feel free to visit teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris White, on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.